The lights inside the theater were almost blinding, washing the stage in white and gold as the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. The audience buzzed with that familiar mix of excitement and skepticism, the kind that always filled the room before an audition on a show known for crushing dreams as often as it created stars. Backstage, a Filipino contestant stood alone, rolling his shoulders once, then twice, breathing that he had crossed oceans, time zones, and years of doubt just to stand on this very spot. When his name was called, he stepped forward into the spotlight wearing a rhinestone-studded jumpsuit that shimmered with every movement. The outfit hugged him like armor, white with gold accents, unmistakably inspired by another era. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience before he even spoke. People nudged each other, smiles spreading, already guessing what was coming. Another Elvis. Another impersonator hoping nostalgia would do the heavy lifting. He introduced himself simply, his accent gentle but clear, and explained that he was from the Philippines. The crowd applauded politely. When asked why he chose this song and this style, he smiled. Not a nervous smile, but a calm one, full of quiet confidence. He said he grew up listening to old records, that Elvis wasn't just music to him but a bridge between generations, between where he came from and where he dreamed of going. It sounded sincere, yet the judges' expressions suggested they had heard similar speeches before. At the judges' table, Simon leaned back slightly, arms crossed. His face gave nothing away except a faint hint of boredom. He had seen countless Elvis tributes over the years, some amusing, some painful, very few memorable. The jumpsuit alone seemed to confirm his expectations. The audience felt it too, that shared assumption that this audition would be entertaining for the wrong reasons. The music began softly, a familiar intro that instantly triggered recognition. A few people in the crowd chuckled again, already anticipating exaggerated hip movements and over-the-top vibrato. The contestant closed his eyes for a brief second, grounding himself. When he opened them, his expression changed. The playful grin vanished, replaced by something deeper: focus, vulnerability, resolve. Then he sang. The first note floated out, warm and steady, cutting through the noise of expectation like a blade. It wasn't loud, wasn't showy. It was controlled, intimate, almost conversational. The laughter stopped. The chuckles died mid-breath. A subtle shift moved through the theater as people leaned forward without realizing it. His voice carried weight, not because it mimicked Elvis perfectly, but because it carried emotion. Each word felt intentional, shaped by experience rather than imitation. The tone was rich, textured, and mature, holding a tenderness that wrapped itself around the melody. He didn't rush. He let the song breathe, letting the silence between phrases speak just as loudly as the notes themselves. The camera cut to the judges. One of them raised their eyebrows in surprise. Another tilted their head, listening more closely. Simon's posture changed almost imperceptibly, arms loosening, his head angling toward the stage. The skepticism in his eyes softened into curiosity. As the song built, the contestant added subtle flourishes, not the exaggerated theatrics people expected, but restrained gestures, a slight sway, a gentle lift of the hand. When he reached for higher notes, they came out clean and effortless, resonating through the hull with clarity. Attention, it commanded it quietly. The audience was silent now. No whispers, no laughter, only listening. Midway through the song, emotion crept into his voice, not forced, not dramatic, but real. His eyes glistened as if memories were surfacing, as if he wasn't just performing but reliving something deeply personal. The song transformed from a classic love ballad into a confession, a story told by someone who understood longing, distance, and hope. Simon leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. His lips pressed together, not in disapproval, but in concentration. This wasn't what he had prepared himself to critique. This wasn't a novelty act. This was artistry. As the final chorus approached, the singer allowed his voice to rise, fuller now, filling every corner of the theater. The sound wrapped around the audience, sending chills down spines. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth. A man nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the stage. Phones lowered, forgotten, as people chose to be present instead of recording. The last note lingered, held just long enough to ache, then gently released into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The quiet was heavy, sacred, as if the entire room needed a moment to process what had just happened. The contestant stood still, chest rising and falling, hands at his sides, eyes forward. He didn't bow, he didn't smile, he simply waited. Then the applause erupted. It started as scattered claps, unsure, and then surged into a roar. The audience leapt to their feet, cheering, shouting, whistling. The sound crashed over the stage like a wave. The contestant's composure cracked, his eyes widened slightly, disbelief flickering across his face. At the judges' table, Simon stood up slowly, clapping. He shook his head once, then again, a small smile breaking through despite himself. He looked around at the crowd, then back at the singer, as if silently admitting he had been wrong. On stage, under the shower of lights and sound, the Filipino Elvis took a small breath, his lips trembling as the realization sank in. What had started as an audition people expected to laugh at had turned into something else entirely, a moment. A turning point, and everyone in the room knew it. For a brief moment after the applause exploded, the contestant stood frozen in the center of the stage, as if his body hadn't yet caught up with what his ears were hearing. The roar of the crowd wrapped around him, rising and falling in waves, chants overlapping cheers, hands clapping until they stung. The lights above felt hotter now, heavier, but he didn't move away from them. His eyes searched the room, trying to understand how a space that had felt so intimidating just minutes ago now felt like it was lifting him up. The camera drifted toward the judges' table, where every expression told a story. One judge had a hand pressed against their chest, blinking rapidly, another was already on their feet, applauding without restraint. Then there was Simon. He stood slowly, deliberately, clapping with a measured rhythm, his face a mixture of surprise and respect. For someone known for dismantling dreams with a single sentence, his silence felt louder than any critique. When the applause finally softened enough for voices to be heard, Simon leaned forward, gripping the table. "I'll be honest with you," he said, his tone calm but weighted. "When you walked out, I made a decision in my head before you sang a word." The audience murmured, sensing what was coming. "And I was wrong." A fresh wave of cheers erupted, louder than before. The contestant felt his throat tighten. He bowed his head slightly, hands clasped together as if in prayer, trying to hold himself together. Simon continued, gesturing toward the stage. "That wasn't an impression. That was you. And that takes courage." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You surprised me." Those two words landed like thunder. The contestant's eyes filled, tears threatening to spill over as he nodded repeatedly, unable to speak. Years of doubt. Family members telling him music was a dream, not a plan. Strangers dismissing his voice online. Nights singing alone just to remind himself why he started, crashed together in that instant. Before he could fully process Simon's words, one of the other judges stood abruptly. "I can't wait," they said, their voice shaking with excitement. "I can't wait another second." They reached for the button. Time seemed to slow. The judge's hand hovered for the briefest moment, and then slammed down. The golden buzzer detonated the room. A deafening boom echoed through the theater as golden confetti burst from above, raining down in thick, shimmering sheets. Gasps turned into screams. The crowd lost control, jumping, shouting, some crying openly. The stage transformed into a storm of gold, the light catching each piece as it fell, making the entire moment glow like something unreal. The contestant dropped to his knees instinctively, hands flying to his face as sobs broke free. He shook his head again and again, overwhelmed, laughing and crying at the same time. Gold clung to his hair, his shoulders, the jumpsuit that had once invited laughter and now looked like it belonged exactly where it was. Simon watched with a rare, soft smile, applauding as he looked out at the audience and then back at the stage. He nodded to himself, as if acknowledging that moments like this were the reason the show still mattered. The judge who pressed the buzzer rushed toward the stage, pulling the contestant into a tight embrace amid the falling confetti. "This is your moment," they whispered, though the microphone barely caught it over the noise. "You earned this." The music swelled triumphantly as the camera cut to the audience, people on their feet, waving flags, strangers hugging strangers, faces lit with joy. Somewhere in the crowd, someone shouted his name again and again until others joined in, the chant growing louder, unified. On stage, the contestant finally stood, wiping his face, looking up as gold continued to fall. He lifted his hand slightly, palms open, as if trying to catch the moment before it disappeared. His lips trembled as he spoke into the microphone, his voice barely steady. He thanked the judges, the audience, his family back home. He spoke about dreaming in a small room, about believing even when belief felt foolish. Simon stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "Remember this feeling," he said firmly. "Because it's only the beginning." Those words echoed long after the confetti cannons fell silent. As the music faded and the lights shifted, the contestant took one last look around the theater. He knew that when he walked off that stage, nothing would be the same. Social media would explode. Videos would spread across continents. People would argue, praise, replay that performance again and again. But in that exact moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that a singer from the Philippines, dressed like a legend, had stepped onto one of the biggest stages in the world and been seen, not as a joke, not as an imitation, but as an artist. And appeared backstage, gold still clinging to his skin, the crowd continued to cheer, knowing they had just witnessed the birth of a story everyone would be talking about for a long time to come.